Hello, and thank you for inviting me into your homes once again on this rather crestfallen occasion. We are at the beginning of the end.
I have to say, I'm gutted.
Why? Because we've almost reached the end of our nostalgic journey through the BBC2 Horror Double Bills?
No, I've run out of Quaalude.
Oh dear me, I'm sure Dagenham Dave can sort you out with something.
That's a relief, but it is the end of all this, the fiefdom, the reviews, everything. Never again shall we revel in such glorious cinematic oddities.
Don't be so maudlin continuity. Never say never.
Perhaps a look at tonight's delights will lift the mood?
Just for you, and in the interests of morale, let's have a look at what's in store.
Holder in the beginning mode and decorate bottom and sides with slices of hard remove skin and bones from
I feel considerably chipper after that.
Splendid. Are you ready?
For old time's sake, Crab, let's roll that wing-ding medley. Good evening, you're watching BBC2. It's time once again for our Horror Double Bills season, and tonight we begin with a true classic from producer Val Lewton, I Walked with a Zombie, starring Tom Conway, Francis D. and James Ellison. Set on the Caribbean island of St. Sebastian, it follows a young Canadian nurse who arrives to care for invalid Jessica Holland, a woman suffering from a mysterious condition. As she becomes involved with the island's troubled plantation owners, she finds herself drawn into a world of love, jealousy, and voodoo. Then at 11:40, our late-night colour fright feature is Zoltan Hound of Dracula. After an explosion uncovers the tomb of Dracula's faithful servant and his fearsome hound, an ancient terror is unleashed and sets out for modern Los Angeles in search of the last surviving descendant of the Dracula family. That's tonight's film lineup here on 2. But first, from the shadowy world of Val Lewton, we walk with a zombie.
Nurse Betty Connell travels to the Caribbean island of St. Sebastian to care for Jessica Holland, the invalid wife of plantation owner Paul Holland, whose strange catatonic condition has baffled everyone around her.
I didn't mean to get you up, Miss Holland. Miss Holland.
In a household racked by grief and shame, and on an island where voodoo beliefs still hold sway, Betsy soon finds herself involved in an enigma as uncanny as it is mystifying. I Walked with a Zombie has its genesis in the pages of a 1942 supplement, The American Weekly. In an article entitled I Met a Zombie, journalist Inez Wallace recounted her experiences travelling through Haiti. Wallace ingratiated herself with a plantation owner who educated her in the lore of zombies and voodoo. As the article unfolds, there are striking similarities with the film. Wallace claimed to have encountered a zombie among the sugar canes and later met a physician who explained the drug used to induce a somnambulistic, death-like state. Her account caused something of a stir and even generated complaints from the Haitian consul general, who felt the article insulted the island and perpetuated sensationalist myths. Meanwhile, RKO Pictures were looking for fresh material in the scare business. Producer Val Lewton had been tasked with overseeing a unit dedicated to producing low-budget thrillers to rival the successes of Universal Pictures. Universal's monster jamborees had proved enormously popular with cinema-goers, even amid the anxieties of wartime. Zombies themselves had already begun creeping into the public imagination, dear viewer, not least because of the United States occupation of Haiti between 1915 and 1934. Of course, Wallace was not breaking entirely new ground. As we mentioned in our review of White Zombie, works such as William C. Brooks' The Magic Island, Zora Neale Hurston's Tell My Horse, and films including White Zombie, The Ghost Breakers, and King of the Zombies had already transformed the exotic plantation mystery into popular entertainment. I Met a Zombie soon circulated around RKO, and recognising the public fascination with the subject, the studio approached Wallace and secured the screen rights. There was a caveat, however. Wallace insisted that any agreement must include her own screenplay based upon her experiences. Working virtually around the clock, she produced a treatment entitled The Zombie Walked With Me in only 8 days. Unfortunately, it amounted to a mere 29 pages. Despite reservations that the treatment lacked depth, RKO accepted the terms. Enter Kurt Siodmak. I bet you thought we'd heard the last of him after his mammoth output for Universal, which we covered in our previous Look, Look and Look Again programmes. Anyway, Siodmak had already enjoyed considerable success with his screenplay for The Wolfman. Lewton, however, was unimpressed. Wallace's treatment was bland, the characterization thin, and the structure rather haphazard. RKO also altered the title to I Walk with a Zombie, and then Syed Mack set to work. The studio believed they were helping Lewton. Lewton himself wasn't entirely convinced. Having just finessed the direction he wanted Cat People to go in, he wanted to create something altogether different from Universal's pulpier horrors. His interests were more literary and psychological. As we shall see, dear viewer, in the films that we look again later, he was aiming for something far more cerebral. Fortunately, Syed Mack understood Lewton's point of view, and the two worked together amicably. In later years, Syed Mack described Lewton as, quote,
a lovely guy, very erudite, much more interesting than any of those Universal guys.
Together they quickly abandoned Wallace's original story and devised a new approach. Lewton famously remarked to Cat People screenwriter DeWitt Bodine, with a glint in his eye,
"What I'm going to give them is Jane Eyre in the West Indies."
However, there was more to it than merely transplanting Charlotte Bronte to the Caribbean. Subtly threaded throughout the story is an indictment of slavery and the emotional scars it left upon the islands and their inhabitants.
Time's gone. Fort Holland was a fort, and now no longer. The Hollands was the most old family, miss. They brought the colored folks to the island. The colored folks in T-Misery.
T-Misery? What's that?
A man, miss. An old man who lives in the garden at Fort Holland, with arrows stuck in him and a sorrowful, weeping look on his black face.
Alive?
No, miss. He's just the same as he was in the beginning, on the front side of an enormous boat.
You mean a figurehead.
If you say, miss. And the enormous boat brought the long-ago fathers and the long-ago mothers of us all chained to the bottom of the boat.
They brought you to a beautiful place, didn't they?
If you say, miss. If you say.
Lewton briefed Syed Mack and then largely left him to his own devices while he concentrated on shooting Cat People. Syed Mack duly produced a script, but Lewton disliked it. It lacked the chilling refinement and the employer-servant romantic dynamic he had envisioned. Amicably, and with no lingering ill feeling, Lewton dismissed Syed Mack, although his name remained in the final screen credits. Enter Ardell Ray, no relation to Faye. Ray had worked in several capacities at RKO before joining Lewton's unit. She embarked upon a substantial rewrite. It cost Lewton further time and money, but he disliked the previous treatment sufficiently enough to juggle schedules and pull strings to obtain the screenplay he really wanted. Ray delivered the goods. The Jane Eyre romance remained intact, and there is also more than a soupçon of Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca in the finished film. Lewton was delighted, and I Walked with a Zombie finally moved into production. After securing approval from the censors, who requested only a minor adjustment to the ending so it appeared less like suicide, Lewton turned his attention to casting. British actress Anna Lee was initially considered for the role of Betsy, but scheduling conflicts prevented her involvement. However, she was used again in the film Bedlam for Lewton, but more of that later. Instead, actress Frances Dee accepted the part, much to Lewton's delight. Tom Conway, who always reminds me a little of Errol Flynn after a particularly spirited evening on the lash, was cast as the troubled plantation owner Paul Holland, no doubt aided by the impression he made in Cat People for the role. Czechoslovakian actress Christine Gordon made her Hollywood debut as the ethereal Jessica, whilst Teresa Harris was cast as the memorable Alma.
Was Mama Rose like Mrs. Holland?
No, she was mindless, but not like Miss Jessica. But the Hungan cured her.
Are you trying to tell me that the voodoo priest could cure Mrs. Holland?
Yes, Miss Betsy. I mean that. The Hungan will speak to the Rara drums, and the drums will speak to Leba and Dambala. Better doctors.
And then there was Carrefour, portrayed by former athlete Darby Jones, whose extraordinary physical presence would ensure generations of viewers slept with one eye open. I used to know Carrefour myself. It was a supermarket near where I live, where my mum bought me Doctor Who paperbacks in the 1980s. Anyway, I digress. Fresh from Cat People, Jacques Tourneur and much of the same production team set about bringing Lewton's vision to the screen. Although largely filmed on sound stages, doubling for the Caribbean island of Saint Sebastian, Tourneur's impeccable sense of atmosphere transforms the artificial into something dreamlike and strangely believable. Do you know what, dear viewer? Perhaps it was simply the extraordinary summer we were experiencing when I was reviewing this, but I Walked with a Zombie seemed even more immersive than usual. Lewton captures the oppressive warmth of the Caribbean so completely that for 90 minutes I found the temperature outside and the temperature on screen appeared to become one and the same. Every frame seems suspended somewhere between the transition point of waking and slumber. Working alongside cinematographer J. Roy Hunt, Tourneur creates pure Gothic poetry. Slatted beams of light, ornate ironwork and carefully composed contrasts turn the screen into a haunted dreamscape. And then there is that walk through the sugarcane fields. Betsy guides Jessica through the rustling canes and the silent presence of voodoo paraphernalia. The tracking shots slowly draw us deeper into the darkness until they encounter Carrefour, the guardian at the crossroads. It is one of the most beautifully orchestrated sequences from this period. As a child, dear viewer, this film genuinely petrified me. I was convinced Carrefour would one night materialise in the corner of my bedroom when the film turned up on television again in the late 80s, where I caught it. Those enormous, bulbous, thyroid-afflicted eyes seemed to stare straight through the screen itself. Carrefour appears fixed in an internal, unblinking vigil. Tourneur knows precisely how to use him. He barely moves, barely speaks, and scarcely does anything at all, yet he remains one of the most unsettling figures in 1940s horror cinema, for me anyway. Tourneur understands that stillness can be more unnerving than any amount of theatrics. Everything works for me in this picture. This is horror of aura and hint. It seeps under your skin rather than battering the senses. And once you've visited Saint Sebastian, dear viewer, a part of you never quite leaves it. Now for me, I Walked with a Zombie has to be 5 gree men out of 5. An absolute classic and a must-see.
It's not beautiful.
You read my thoughts, Mr. Holland.
It's easy enough to read the thoughts of a newcomer. Everything seems beautiful because you don't understand. Those flying fish, they're not leaping for joy. They're jumping in terror. Bigger fish want to eat them. That luminous water, it takes its gleam from millions of tiny dead bodies. The glitter of putrescence. There's no beauty here, only death and decay.
You can't really believe that?
Everything good dies here, even the stars.
Sultan! Sultan! Sultan!
Centuries after Dracula's staking, his loyal wolfhound, Zoltan, and the Count's devoted servant, Veit Smit, are accidentally awakened from their tombs by a group of soldiers. Bound by an undying devotion to his master, the vampire hound sets out to find Dracula's last surviving descendant and restore the family bloodline. As a series of baffling attacks draws the attention of Inspector Branco and Michael Drake, Count Dracula's last descendant, the pair gradually uncover the terrifying truth behind a string of mystery slayings and the creature responsible. But unless they can stop Zoltan's deadly quest, the legacy of Dracula may very well live again.
What's that? Don't move. Sounds like dogs. Maybe they're mine. I doubt it.
Zoltan, Hound of Dracula, is one of those more curious entries in the BBC2 Horror Double Bill, sitting comfortably alongside films like Super Beast and Daughters of Satan as one of this season's more unabashed grindhouse offerings. The film is an unusual blend of vampire mythology, action thriller, and killer animal cinema, all wrapped up in a distinctly bell-bottomed 1970s package. Originally filmed under the working title Hounds of Dracula, it eventually reached British cinemas in May 1977 as Zoltan, Hound of Dracula, before American audiences encountered it a year later under the less colourful title Dracula's Dog. Directed by Albert Band from a screenplay by Frank Ray Perilli, the film arrives at a time post-Count Yorga, when vampire cinema was moving away from decaying castles and candlelit crypts, placing Dracula's legacy firmly in the modern world. Band embraces that contemporary setting for me with surprising confidence. The story unfolds across sun-baked California rather than the moonlit, misted landscapes traditionally associated with our Count, borrowing as much from the 1970s burgeoning Nature Strikes Back cycle as it does from classic horror. As Zoltan gradually builds an undead pack of vampiric dogs, the film begins to resemble entries such as Dogs. And the pack resulting in a decent shack under siege climax, the film's high point. Much of the movie's success rests with its remarkable canine performers. Zoltan himself, portrayed by an expertly trained Doberman, veteran animal trainers Carl Lewis Miller and Lou Schumacher deserves enormous credit for coaxing convincing performances from their four-legged friends, several of whom would also appear in other memorable genre films of the period, including The Hills Have Eyes. Leading the human cast is Michael Pataki as Michael Drake, the unsuspecting final descendant of Dracula, alongside Academy Award winner Jose Ferrer as the skeptical Inspector Branco. Horror fans will also recognise Pataki from The Return of Count Yorga and The Bat People. Yet perhaps the film's most unforgettable human presence is Reginalda as a sinister Veit Smit. A familiar face to horror fans, we'll return to Nalda's remarkable career, dear viewer, in just a momento. Behind the camera, there is another future legend at work. The special makeup effects were created by Stan Winston. Winston's special effects CV is exemplary. Other horror involvements were the Friday the 13th series of films, The Thing, and while we were in a howling mood, shortly after Zoltan, he worked on the prosthetics in 1982's movie White Dog. A worthwhile film, worth catching, dear viewer, if you can hunt it down. Then, of course, he would become one of Hollywood's most celebrated effects artists on popcorn fodder, such as The Terminator, Aliens, Predator, and Jurassic Park. Complementing the visuals is Andrew Belling's atmospheric score, whose eerie electronic textures helps elevate the movie slightly higher than its modest budget. Perhaps that explains why Zoltan continues to divide opinion. Its premise is undeniably eccentric, yet Albert Band plays it with complete sincerity. Just a wholehearted attempt to merge vampire folklore with the era's appetite for animal attack thrillers. But despite the limelight being stolen by the furry ones, in this film it's always good to see Reggie Nalder. Born Alfred Reginald Natzik in Vienna, Nalder came from a theatrical family, although even the year of his birth remains something of an enigma. Before the Second World War, he worked as a dancer and cabaret performer, and photographs from that period reveal a strikingly handsome young man, almost unrecognisable from the eventual facial disfigurement audiences would later come to associate with him. At some point, Nalder suffered severe burns to the lower half of his face. He never truly revealed exactly how they happened, with conflicting stories and offering several different explanations throughout his life, so the truth here ultimately died with him. Rather than allowing the tragedy to define him, he turned it into an unlikely asset, creating a distinctive screen presence in the horror genre. His breakthrough came when Alfred Hitchcock cast him as the assassin in The Man Who Knew Too Much, although the role is relatively small.
Your distinguished target is already on his way. There's a car waiting for you downstairs, in the back entrance. You ought to pick up a Miss Benson on the way. She'll be your companion in the box. She'll lend you an air of respectability, if that's possible.
Will you have the money when I return?
Don't you trust me?
What is your English proverb? A wolf in sheep's clothing.
Throughout the 1960s, he became a familiar face on both TV and cinema screens, appearing in series such as Thriller and Star Trek, while filmmakers including Dario Argento also recognised his unique qualities. Argento cast him in a bit part in The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. For horror fans, however, the 1970s belonged to Reggie Nalder. His unforgettable portrayal of the sadistic witchfinder albino in Mark of the Devil cemented his place among horror cinema's great character villains.
Stop that witch! I accuse you of having trampled on the cross, of having ridden to the Sabbath, and thrown the holy cross of our Savior into manure so that the skies grew dark and the rain fell upon the earth.
No, look at his face. He is the devil. I swear he rapes women before burning them. Yes, it's true. Look at his face. He is the devil, not me. Coward. How can you sit there like that? I'm not a witch. I'm not a witch. I'm not a witch. I tell you, I'm not a witch. And you all know that. Why don't you do something?
Just look. Look, the sign of the devil's on her mouth. She kissed him to bring impotence to the country. She is a witch!
He returned in Mark of the Devil Part 2, playing the equally malevolent Natas, and by this point his gaunt, disfigured features had become an unmistakable trademark.
Enough. Move on to the dungeon. Let's move on.
What are you doing?
I have your son.
No.
You won't be able to forget me.
You filthy bastard! You filthy animal!
Towards the end of the decade, Nalder demonstrated that he was never precious about the roles he accepted, appearing as Van Helsing in the X-rated horror spoof Dracula Sucks.
You should go back to your own country.
I'm going to stay here where I am needed.
You are too late. My blood is mixed with Mina's.
I will not only save Mina's soul, but her life.
It can only be done if she dies by day. I shall see she dies by night.
I will see that Carl-Fixed Abbey is torn down, stone by stone. I will find your box and drive a stake through your heart.
You have a strong will, Van Helsing. Wolfbane.
Stronger than Wolfbane, Count. Alarm.
Before returning under the pseudonym Detlef van Berg in a movie Blue Ice, part film noir, part mystery thriller, and part fuck flick. Blue Ice is one of the last examples of a period when X-rated productions still aspired to tell ambitious stories with respectable production values. If you're curious, dear viewer, it's certainly worth seeking out. And don't worry, dear viewer, Reggie Nalder's nads remain mercifully off screen.
Yeah, Manfred? Good. Sehr good. Wunderbar.
Nalder approached these productions with the same professionalism he brought to every role. His greatest triumph, of course, was in 1979 when director Toby Hooper cast him as Kurt Barlow in the original and best version of Stephen King's Salem's Lot. Hidden beneath layers of makeup inspired by Max Schreck's Nosferatu, Nalder created one of television's most terrifying vampires, which as a child caused me out-and-out trauma, like many others, children and adults alike, who saw it on the BBC.
The sun's gone down.
Sadly, Reggie Nalder passed away in 1991 after a battle with bone cancer, leaving behind an extraordinary body of work. He rarely played heroes, seldom spoke many lines, and almost never received top billing, yet few character actors had gravitas quite like he did. Ironically, those who knew Nalder said in reality, off-screen, he was completely the opposite. A gentle soul, softly spoken, and with a love of opera. I read that somewhere. I don't think he should be forgotten, as he brought so much without the fanfare. And he truly is an undisputed icon of genre cinema. So back to Zoltan. Yes, it's a silly film, but it's also immense fun, and a particularly special one for me. While my mum did the weekly shop in QuickSave, I'd happily spend an hour or more browsing the shelves of our local video rental shop, and the old EMI VHS video cassette of Zoltan is one box cover I remember vividly, sitting proudly amongst the crammed horror section. Mum let me rent Zoltan, and being both dog-themed and a horror film, it was practically guaranteed to become a favourite. Watching it again today, the flaws are certainly more apparent, but the inner child who recalls first carrying that VHS home was rewarded admirably. So, for that reason, I'm awarding Zoltan, Hound of Dracula, 3.5 Bow-Wow-Wows out of 5, an affectionate, gloriously goofy canine chiller that could have only sprung from one of cinema's most adventurous and eclectic decades.
Good evening and welcome to BBC2, where we continue our season of horror double bills. Tonight's first feature comes from producer Val Lewton, the influential Cat People, starring Simone Simon and Kent Smith. Set in New York, it tells the story of Oliver, a young draftsman who falls in love with the mysterious Irina, a Serbian-born fashion artist, haunted by legends from her homeland. As their relationship deepens, Irina becomes increasingly convinced that an ancient curse lies within her, threatening anyone who dares to love her. Then at about midnight, we stepped back to the early days of colour cinema with Mystery of the Wax Museum starring Lionel Atwill and Fay Wray. A new wax museum harbours some very sinister secrets where the exhibits bear an uncanny human resemblance. Actress Glenda Farrell investigates, Atwill menaces, and Ray screams her way through this early classic of horror cinema. But before this, we are off to New York City to meet the Cat People.
In the bustling streets of New York City, Serbian fashion illustrator Irina Dubrovna appears to have found the promise of a new life when she falls in love with the affable engineer Oliver Reed.
Perhaps, Mr. Reed, you would like to have tea in my apartment?
Oh, Mr. Dubrovna, you make life so simple.
Yet beneath her quiet composure lies an all-consuming fear, rooted in the ancient folklore of her homeland. Convinced she is descended from a cursed bloodline whose women transform into savage panthers when consumed by passion, jealousy, or lust, Irina resists the very intimacy she longs for. As Oliver's growing friendship with his colleague Alice Moore begins to test the brittle foundations of their marriage, Irina's fears become increasingly difficult to dismiss. Are they merely the delusions of a tormented mind, or do the ancient legends conceal a shocking truth?
Leave us, Irina.
Released in 1942, Cat People, As I Walked with a Zombie, arrived at a time when horror cinema was largely the preserve of laboratories crackling with improbable science and grotesque creatures lurking behind layers of elaborate makeup. Universal had built an empire upon Dracula, Frankenstein and the Wolfman, but as we mentioned, dear viewer, producer Val Lewton believed horror could achieve something richer than simple exploitation. Terror, he argued, was most effective when it stirred the imagination rather than overwhelmed it. What the audience imagined would always be far more unsettling than anything placed directly before their eyes. RKO Pictures handed Lewton here a title he openly disliked, a modest budget of little more than $130,000, and just 18 days in which to complete production. Studio executives expected another routine programmer to fill the lower half of a cinema bill, but instead Lewton saw limitations not as obstacles in his way, but as fortuity. Expensive visual effects disappeared from the equation, forcing Lewton and director Jacques Tourneur to cultivate suspense through atmosphere, quiescence, and Freudian psychology. Sets were borrowed from earlier productions, including the magnificent staircase left standing from Orson Welles' The Magnificent Ambersons, while every available resource was pressed into service with remarkable ingenuity. Actress, the pantherine Simone Simon's interpretation of main protagonist Irina Dubrovna, is a tragic heroine. She's not driven by vengeance, greed, or madness. She longs for the ordinary comforts most people take for granted: companionship, marriage, intimacy, and love. Yet she believes that surrendering to those desires will awaken something archaic and destructive within her. Love for Irina is not liberation. It is contretemps, waiting to happen. Simon's soft voice and delicate manner conceal such a profound emotional turmoil, I found. Her fear is not singularly of becoming a were-cat, it is the dreadful possibility that she may destroy the very person she wishes most to embrace. Modern audiences often describe cat people as psychological horror, but its emotional landscape really is closer to tragedy. Irina lives in perpetual exile, geographically separated from her Serbian homeland and therefore emotionally dissonant from the bustling modernity of New York. She inhabits a city filled with people, yet remains utterly alone, exactly like the trapped panther in the cage. Even her marriage offers no sanctuary. Oliver loves the woman he imagines Irina can become, while never truly understanding the woman standing before him. Running through this melancholy is an unmistakable current of erotic tension. For a film produced under Hollywood's production code, Cat People is remarkably candid in its treatment of sexual repression. The marriage remains unconsummated, not through lack of affection, but through unbridled fear. Desire itself becomes deadly. Every kiss and every touch, the foreplay, leading to sexual union, threatens transformation. Every expression of jealousy or a moment of ecstasy risks releasing the beast Irina believes sleeps within her. Lewton and Tourneur never treat these anxieties as lurid spectacle. Instead, dear viewer, they present sexuality as an emotional battlefield for the character where longing and dread become inseparable. The result is surprisingly adult, suggesting that the greatest conflict here is fought within the human heart rather than against supernatural evil. This ambiguity for me lies at the very core of the film. Is Irina genuinely descended from an ancient race cursed to become predatory cats? Or has she constructed an elaborate mythology to explain profound psychological trauma? Lewton refuses to provide comforting certainty. It is an ambiguity Tourneur would revisit years later in Night of the Demon, a film we explored in our previous review. Even the shrink Dr. Judd in this film, played superbly by actor Tom Conway, is every inch the gentleman, yet possesses precisely the right amount of scuzz. He represents rational confidence rather than absolute truth. His clinical explanations offer reassurance but never complete conviction. The audience is invited to inhabit the same uneasy territory as Irina herself, suspended between reason and irrationality, never entirely certain where reality ends and the imagination begins. It is another hallmark of the Lewton films, particularly those directed by Jacques Tourneur, whose dreamlike sensibility occupies that fragile frontier between civilization and, here, instinct. That uncertainty finds its perfect visual expression through the remarkable work of cinematographer Nicholas Musuraca. Nicholas Musuraca was less interested in photographing faces than in illuminating states of mind. His use of low-key lighting and bold chiaroscuro serves a deeply psychological purpose. Halls of light seem to isolate characters with darkness.
And the tread of their feet whispers in my brain. I have no peace, for they are in me.
In me? In me?
Musuraca allows light itself to become the architect. He engraves with it. Rather than decorating his sets, Musuraca allows the lighting itself to furnish the frame, while faces emerge from darkness only partially revealed, concealing thoughts too painful to articulate. Nowhere is that visual poetry more extraordinary than in one of the most celebrated suspense sequences in this film. The swimming pool scene has become legendary, not because of what it reveals, but because of what it withholds. There are no elaborate special effects, no startling transformations, and scarcely a glimpse of the predator itself. Instead, Tourneur and Musuraca construct an atmosphere in which the audience becomes an unwilling accomplice, compelled to imagine horrors that remain tantalizingly beyond reach. Musuraca's lighting is nothing short of extraordinary. The shimmering patterns cast by the water seem almost alive, turning architecture into emotion and allowing the room itself to express that fear Alice struggles to suppress. The sequence becomes a study in psychological vulnerability. We share her uncertainty because we are denied certainty ourselves. Is Irina really stalking her? Or has fear become a predator in its own right? Tourneur refuses to answer. Instead, he stretches silence almost to breaking point, trusting the audience's imagination to complete the nightmare jigsaw. It is a remarkable demonstration of Lewton's guiding philosophy. Horror, he believed, should never reveal too much, as he shared with the Los Angeles Times. When he said that,
"We tossed away the horror formula right from the beginning. No grisly stuff for us, no mask-like faces, hardly human, with gnashing teeth and hair standing on end. No creaky physical manifestations, no horror piled on horror."
That same philosophy gave birth to one of cinema's most influential moments, and dear viewer, it would be remiss of me not to mention. As Alice hurries home through deserted streets after sensing an unseen presence behind her, Tourneur orchestrates the sequence with exquisite patience. Her footsteps strike the pavement in nervous, clacking-heeled rhythm. Another set of footsteps appears to respond from somewhere behind. They quicken as she quickens, then cease abruptly when she stops. The silence becomes almost unbearable. Every instinct tells us that some dreadful apparition is about to emerge. Instead, the stillness is shattered by the violent hiss of compressed air. As a city bus suddenly bursts into frame, the audience jumps. That deceptively simple device became known throughout the film industry as the Lewton bus, and it remains one of horror cinema's most abiding contributions. Modern audiences know the technique as the jump scare, but there is an important distinction. Lewton never used surprise as a substitute for suspense. He earned that shock through meticulous adroitness, allowing anxiety to build naturally before releasing it in an entirely unexpected and perfectly ordinary fashion. It has been imitated countless times by other filmmakers, too many to mention, yet few have harmonised the felicity with which Lewton and Tourneur first employed it. Studio executives repeatedly demanded to see more of the creature, even considering replacing Jacques Tourneur only days into production. Lewton stood firmly behind his director, insisting that concealment was infinitely more powerful than display. Lewton is a maestro of hint, as we see in this clip. When Cat People premiered on Friday the 13th in December 1942, many critics failed to appreciate what Lewton had accomplished. Some dismissed the picture as another inexpensive horror programmer. Audiences, however, recognised something altogether different. The film becomes an unexpected sensation, earning close to $3 million from its tiny budget and remaining in cinemas long enough for several critics to revisit it and revise their original opinions. Lewton and Tourneur also brought terror into the modern city, placing extraordinary fears within recognisable surroundings inhabited by believable people. Their films, unlike their contemporaries, actually offered multi-layered facets of the human condition, void in the two-dimensional characterization in some, if not most, of Universal's output. In doing so, they established a blueprint that countless psychological and celestial thrillers would follow for decades to come. The lasting power of Cat People lies not in its technical innovations, remarkable though they are, nor even in the famous Lewton bus. It lies in the compassion the film extends towards Irina Dubrovna. Lewton never ridicules her fears, and I admire that. That emotional generosity elevates Cat People far beyond the conventions of the horror genre. It asks us to pity its monster rather than fear her, to recognise loneliness where others just see menace, and to understand that the deepest wounds are often those hidden from ordinary perspective. More than 80 years after its release, Val Lewton's masterpiece continues to cast its spell with astonishing nuance. Cat People, seen again, made a bigger impact on me, more so than the child that saw it expecting the transformations and bestial violence. Now I really get the picture, and it's been an absolute pleasure sharing this with you. So it has to be, from me, for Cat People, 5 saucers of cream out of 5. I wouldn't change a single drop.
You're late, aren't you? I kept my appointment. You see, I've never believed your story. I'm not afraid of you. I take you in my arms. So little, so soft. Warm perfume in your hair, your body. Don't be afraid of me, Irina.
Gifted sculptor Ivany Gore watches his prized wax museum destroyed by fire after his business partner commits an unforgivable act of greed. Years later, a spectacular new wax museum opens in New York. Its astonishing, lifelike figures become the talk of the town. But when corpses begin vanishing from the city morgue, tenacious reporter Florence Dempsey suspects the seemingly unrelated events are connected. As her investigation gathers pace, her unsuspecting friend, Charlotte, finds herself marked by a madman, destined to become his latest exhibit, her beauty preserved forever beneath a coating of scalding, flesh-searing wax.
Don't be afraid, my dear. In a few minutes, the container will have filled with wax. And when it overflows, your beauty will be preserved forever.
Released in 1933, The Mystery of the Wax Museum is one of the finest examples of Hollywood's brief but extraordinary pre-code era, a time before strict censorship arrived and filmmakers were free to explore subjects that would soon become forbidden fruit. Wax Museum sees murder, corpse robbery, junkies, and a disturbing undercurrent that all find their way into a dark production with only brief moments of respite supplied by the wisecracking female protagonist. At the core of the film is a magnificent performance from Lionel Atwill as the gifted sculptor Ivan Igor. Atwill relishes the part, shifting between sympathetic victim and then terrifying nut job. Alongside him is Glenda Farrell, who steals many scenes as wisecracking reporter Florence Dempsey long before fearless female journalists became commonplace. Florence drives much of the investigation with wit, intelligence, and plenty of sharp-tongued humour, and for the 1930s, it's a surprise of how emancipated she really is.
Say, if you're stringing me, old-timer...
Why should I string you? They were sweeties up to a month ago.
Oh, what does that prove?
Nothing. Only she may have tried to blackmail him. You know such things have happened. Anyway, he was in her apartment a few hours before she was found dead.
Saved one job.
The press room for yours. Hey, hold everything till I give you the rest of the dirt.
Make it snappy, Colonel.
They've ordered an autopsy over at Bellevue immediately. You better skip on over there.
Don't give this to anybody else, will you?
It's all yours.
Fay Wray, just months before becoming immortal in King Kong, plays Charlotte Duncan, who earns her dollar as that inevitable scream queen we know and love her for, dear viewer. Frank McHugh provides further comic support as Florence's editor.
Been doing experiments with scotch and soda again, huh?
Now, where'd you get the news item? From a little bird?
Yeah. Have a pleasant vacation?
Charming. What delightful people crippled.
That's fine. Consider yourself crippled, financially. See if you can jar your charming friends loose from enough to eat on.
Meaning what?
That you're a sure bet to place in the bread line. There's no room on this rag for the purely ornamental. You're easy on the eyes and pretty conceited about it.
Is Mama's little dumpling getting tough?
I'm through clowning, Florence. You're all washed up. Get out.
While Alan Vincent appears as Ralph Burton, Charlotte's cliched fiancé.
Hello, Ralph.
Hello, darling. Hello, Florence.
Hello. Are we late?
No, not at all. Gee, that's a pretty dress. Have I seen it before?
Yes, I think so. Thank goodness that's settled.
Warner Brothers entrusted the film to the prolific Michael Curtiz, a director, as we know, who would later helm classics such as Casablanca and The Adventures of Robin Hood. Following this journey through the horror double bill, dear viewer, Curtiz now sits alongside Tourneur as one of my favourite directors. Even at this very early stage of his career, Curtiz demonstrates his extraordinary visual strike. Again, we get to see Curtiz's meticulous frame compositions and his use of lighting, perspective, pace, and deco-dread atmosphere. This is all utilised to create a growing sense of unease before unleashing genuine moments of classic horror and suspense. Much of that atmosphere comes from the remarkable work of art director Anton Grot. As in Dr. X, Grot's set designs are a celebration in the sleek, streamlined deco of the time, and of course it's where deco embraces German expressionism. His partnership with Curtiz produced some of the most visually striking sets of the early sound era, to be honest with you, dear viewer, proving that horror could be every bit as handsome as it was disquieting. The film was photographed using the early two-stripped Technicolor process, making it a stablemate of Dr. X of sorts, and we looked at that film previously, dear viewer. Limited largely to reds and greens, the process gives the picture an almost surreal appearance on occasion. The museum, when it goes into the inferno, the glowing laboratories and eerie wax figures take on such an uncanny quality, and when the wax figures melt, this also seems gruesome and very Raiders of the Lost Ark. Ironically, the intense studio lights required by Technicolor meant real wax figures would melt, so many of the museum exhibits were portrayed by actors standing perfectly still, occasionally creating the unnerving illusion that the statues themselves might just spring to life. Its pre-code credentials are impossible to ignore. Beyond the gruesome murders and stolen corpses, the film openly depicts heroin addiction through a desperate character manipulated by both criminals and police alike. There are suggestive jokes.
Hello, sweetheart.
Oh, hello.
How's your sex life?
Revealing costumes, and moments of violence that would have been heavily censored just a year later under the production code, but would have wowed the thrill seekers at the time. Although contemporary critics dismissed the film as tasteless sensationalism, and thank God it is, dear viewer, audiences embraced it, making it one of Warner Brothers' biggest successes of 1933. Today, it stands not only as a landmark of early colour horror cinema, but possibly one of the most stylish of the decade to boot, fanfaring that wonderful deco vibe. It's gorgeous. And to think this film was considered lost at one stage. Thank the heavens Mr. Warner retained a copy of it in his private collection to be lovingly restored later for our delectation. For me, The Mystery of the Wax Museum remains an absolute classic. The film is mesmerising. It is beautifully designed and of course anchored solidly to viewer by Lionel Atwill's unforgettable performance. It's a movie that I adore every time I watch it, and over the years I have seen its restoration into the impeccable version we have now. Paired with Cat People, it makes for one of the best couplings for this horror double bill. The audience were really spoiled by the BBC on this particular Saturday night. So, Mystery of the Wax Museum, it earns no more and certainly no less than 5 charred faces out of 5.
New Year's Eve ain't what it used to be. You know, this is only the second one tonight. Times sure are tough.
Well, what happened to this one?
Oh, her husband slapped her full of lumps. Said she talked too much.
What's that?
Embalming fluid. It makes him jump. Ain't that just like a woman? Always have to have the last word.
You're watching BBC2. Welcome to another evening of horror on BBC2, and the latest in our season of classic double bills. In just a few moments on 2, we continue our Val Lewton season with The Seventh Victim, starring Kim Hunter and Tom Conway. Mary Gibson arrives in New York searching for her missing sister Jacqueline. Mary soon finds her sister was involved with a secret, sinister coven. Then, shortly after midnight, our colour feature is Race with the Devil, starring Peter Fonda, Warren Oates and Loretta Swit. A holiday trip across Texas turns into a nightmare when 4 friends accidentally stumble across a satanic ritual ending in human sacrifice. They soon find themselves pursued by Satanists hell-bent on ensuring there will be no witnesses. That should provide more than enough chills for a summer evening. But first, from producer Val Lewton, The Seventh Victim.
Drink it, Jacqueline. There's nothing else for you to do. They say you've got to die.
Mary Gibson, a recent graduate, becomes increasingly concerned after hearing nothing from her older sister Jacqueline, and fears she may be in grave danger. Travelling to Manhattan in search of answers, Mary enlists the help of a private investigator to trace her whereabouts. Yet, wherever she turns, she is stonewalled.
Anything that might give me some hint as to where I might find Jacqueline?
Leave me your address. If I find anything, I'll get in touch with you.
I'm stopping at the Chatsworth.
Thank you, my dear.
Before long, Mary uncovers something malevolent. Jacqueline has fallen into the grasp of a secretive palladist cult. Having betrayed the group by revealing its activities to psychiatrist Dr. Judd, Jacqueline is ordered to atone for her transgression. Their chilling demand is as simple as it is horrifying. Jacqueline must take her own life. So far, dear viewer, we have explored the recurring Val Lewton theme of superstition versus psychology. Time and again, the arcane collides with the rational, leaving us to decide whether we are witnessing truth or chimera, all the while scaring the living daylights out of us in the process. And so we arrive at the seventh victim, where the question is whether the influence of a satanic cult can bend an individual's will. The Palladist cult featured in the film is a fictional secret society inspired by the notorious Palladian hoax of the 19th century, which falsely claimed that a hidden branch of Freemasonry worshipped Satan. Although entirely mythical, the story blended secret societies, occultism and devil worship, making it an ideal inspiration for the sinister cult at the heart of this movie. Nicholas Musaraka returns as cinematographer, so once again expect wonderful atmospheric photography with rich contrasts of light and shadow that have become synonymous with the Lewton productions. Following The Leopard Man, which we shall cover later, director Jacques Tourneur was moved away from the Lewton unit and promoted to larger studio productions within RKO. This left Lewton with an unexpected vacancy, and editor Mark Robson was invited to step behind the camera despite his own reservations that Tourneur would prove an exceedingly difficult act to follow. In truth, he wasn't wrong. For the seventh victim, co-writer DeWitt Bodine was encouraged to attend meetings of an actual Satanist group in New York City to lend an air of authenticity to the screenplay he was writing alongside Charles O'Neill. Speaking in 1976, Bodine recalled the experience rather differently from what audiences might expect. He remarked that the Satanists were
exactly like the devil worshippers in Rosemary's Baby. A bunch of tea-drinking old ladies and gentlemen sitting there muttering imprecations against Hitler.
For the film, however, the collective coven becomes precisely that, brimstone with just a delicate hint of lavender. From the opening moments, the metaphysical announces itself. We are greeted with the words from the 17th century metaphysical poet John Donne. I run to death, and death meets me fast, and all my pleasures are like yesterday. Even Mary's departure from her boarding school carries symbolic value, as the students repeatedly chant the French verb chercher, meaning to search, foreshadowing the pilgrimage she's about to undertake in search of a missing sister. It is touches such as these nuances that elevate a picture like The Seventh Victim beyond the ordinary. As we already know, dear viewer, Lewton possessed a fascination with tragic female protagonists. In Cat People, we had Irina, while here we meet Jacqueline, portrayed with remarkable restraint by the mesmerizing actress Jean Brooks. Brooks possesses an almost sculptural beauty. Her striking angular haircut, or wig, giving her an almost pharaonic appearance, isolates her from those around her simply by appearance alone. The tragedy of Jacqueline lies in her determination to retain one final freedom, the right to choose the moment of her own death. Her sparse apartment, containing little more than a chair and a noose, becomes a chilling reflection of that decision. Her first appearance is equally haunting, revealing herself to Mary only briefly before silently pressing a finger to her lips and disappearing once more. Throughout the film, paranoia hangs over every encounter, with virtually every character concealing shadowy motives and intentions. An unexpected delight is the return of Tom Conway as Dr. Judd, last encountered in Cat People. Here we discover he has abandoned psychiatry in favour of writing, although Judd still exudes that familiar air of polished, gentlemanly sleaze. He is only one of a fusillade of inauspicious characters. There is the intimidating Mrs. Reddy, who inherits Jacqueline's cosmetics business, together with a young female employee whose unwavering devotion to Jacqueline could be interpreted as a subtle lesbian subtext.
Drink it, Jacqueline. There's nothing else for you to do. They say you've got to die. Drink it, Jacqueline, you've got to. I can't stand it.
One of several quietly suggested sapphic undertones present throughout the film. The likeable private detective, whom we naturally assume will accompany Mary throughout much of the investigation, is instead dispatched with startling abruptness by an unseen assailant with a sharp pair of scissors in one of the film's most effective and genuinely shocking sequences.
Mr. August, the night watchman. The night watchman, he's in the salon. Mr. August, what is it? What's the matter? Mr. August.
Another memorable example that I thought was brilliant comes during Mary's encounter with Mrs. Reddy. Her face remains concealed behind a shower curtain, reducing her to little more than an ominous silhouette accompanied by that wonderfully deep, governing voice. She almost becomes demonic in appearance. It does make one wonder whether Alfred Hitchcock took note before creating a remarkably similar visual effect in Psycho. Nor should we forget the appearance of not one but two classic Lewton bus moments. The first involving a dustbin lid and a dog. The second erupting through raucous merriment.
Please help me. There's a man following me.
I shouldn't wonder, babe. I shouldn't wonder.
Oh, please, I'm serious. Help me.
I'll help you to a beer and a sandwich.
In the second Lewton bus, visually, the twin masks of comedy and tragedy offers a visual nod on the fragility of human existence. The seventh victim also embraces the psychological concept of the Gestalt theory, asking whether the collective strength of a group can ultimately overwhelm the will of an individual. Yet true to Lewton's philosophy, certainty forever remains elusive. Are we witnessing supernatural intervention here? Is there genuinely a demon at work at Night of the Demon? Can folklore transform a woman into a panther in The Cat People? Or can black magic create the walking dead in I Walked with a Zombie? Or are we simply seeing events through the perceptions of the frightened, vulnerable characters? As with Lewton's finest work, the answers are never handed to us. The jury remains permanently out. For such an extraordinary, bleak and pessimistic work, it is perhaps unsurprising that the seventh victim struggled to find widespread appreciation upon its original release, arriving as the Second World War reached its closing stages. It is a genuinely tenebrious tour de force, although I do feel it might have benefited from just a few additional minutes to smooth over occasional lapses in narrative coherence. Interestingly, DeWitt Bodine himself shared precisely that opinion. Looking back on the film, he lamented,
I think it would have been better if they had allowed it to be 6 or 7 minutes longer. Certain things that should have been kept in the picture and were shot were edited out. And there are times, in my opinion, when the story that exists now doesn't make sense. It was the front office interfering again.
One could hardly blame anyone for scratching their head during certain passages in the movie, yet that slight obscurity only adds, for me, to the film's originality, warranting repeated viewings for sure. Personally, I absolutely loved The Seventh Victim. I was astonished by just how bold the film proved to be, Quite how it slipped past the constraints of the Hays Code with its uncompromising ending remains something of a slight miracle. Its refusal to offer comfort, together with the overwhelming pity it evokes for Jacqueline, lands with tremendous emotional force, a true smack in the guts. Visually, The Seventh Victim is an unqualified triumph for taking film noir to another level entirely. For The Seventh Victim, I award 4 Satanic Majesty's requests out of 5, but be warned, dear viewer, this is a film that demands your complete attention. Watch it alone, free from distraction, surrender yourself to its peculiar rhythm, and allow it to quietly absorb you.
Who are you? I'm Mimi. I'm dying. No. Yes. I've been quiet. Oh, ever so quiet. I hardly move. And yet it keeps coming all the time, closer and closer. And I rest and I rest and still I'm dying.
And you don't want to die. I've always wanted to die. Always.
I'm afraid. And I'm tired of being afraid. Of waiting.
Why wait?
I'm not going to wait. I'm going out. I'm going to laugh and dance and do all the things I used to do.
And then?
I don't know.
You will die.
What begins as a carefree road trip across the American Southwest soon becomes a desperate fight for survival when 2 couples witness a brutal satanic ritual deep in the wilderness. After narrowly escaping with their lives, they turn to the local authorities, only to discover that help is in desperately short supply. With no one left to trust, their holiday descends into a relentless cat-and-mouse chase as the ruthless satanic cult closes in, determined to silence the only witnesses to their terrifying secret. Race with the Devil sits comfortably among director Jack Starrett's finest achievements and remains one of the great drive-in movies, for me, of the 1970s. Before stepping behind the camera, Starrett was also a familiar face on screen. Many will remember him as Gabby, the permanently pissed townsman in Blazing Saddles.
Hey! The sheriff is in this! What are you saying? The sheriff is near!
While others will recognise him as the sadistic Deputy Galt in First Blood.
All right, put your hands on top of your head and turn around.
Oh, Christ. We should report this to Teasel, Galt. Look at that.
You just do what I tell you.
Galt! What the fuck was that?
Well, the man said clean him up. Clean him up.
As a director, he built an enviable catalogue of film that included biker exploitation, such as Run Angel Run and The Losers, then black exploitation, such as Slaughter and Cleopatra Jones.
Protect and serve? Shit. Now guess who jumped out of the woodpile?
Before Starrett moved successfully into TV with series such as The Dukes of Hazzard and Hill Street Blues, Race with the Devil would become one of his biggest commercial successes. Interestingly, Starrett wasn't the original choice to direct. That honour belonged to exploitation or legend Lee Frost. Now, Frost shot several days before producer Paul Maslansky decided to replace him and begin again, almost from scratch. Frost retained his writing credit though, but it reportedly took a little while for Peter Fonda and Warren Oates to warm to Starrett and Maslansky after the change, as both actors had been looking forward to working with Frost. Now, Lee Frost, dear viewer, really was one of a kind. His filmography is a glorious fetid sojourn through American grindhouse cinema. He directed revenge-exploitation in the film Chrome and Hot Leather, produced and directed numerous Mondo documentaries, including Mondo Freudo and Mondo Bizarro, and of course directed the infamous Love Camp 7. Nearly 6 decades on, that notorious Nazi-exploitation picture still remains banned in Britain. Silly, isn't it? Frost also produced a string of roughies and exploitation pictures, and even worked as cinematographer on the hardcore roughie Climax of Blue Power, which has to be seen to be believed as a pure exercise in poor misogynistic taste. His films are certainly an acquired taste, but if ever there was a filmmaker devoted to cinematic sleaze, it was Mr. Lee Frost. Producer Paul Maslansky kept the budget to just over $1.3 million and even managed to bring the picture in slightly under budget. Maslansky would enjoy a remarkable career, producing films such as Hard Times, Damnation Alley, Deathline, and of course becoming forever associated with the hugely successful Police Academy series of films throughout the 1980s. Peter Fonda was never one to shy away from danger. He loved performing as much of his own stunt work as possible, and much of the spectacular motorcycle riding in action during the grand finale is genuinely him. He later said everyone had an absolute blast making the film, and one of the biggest attractions was the opportunity to reunite with his good friend Warren Oates after they appeared in The Hired Hand and 92 in the Shade together. Horror wasn't a genre Fonda visited very often. This was really his first full-blooded horror film. He'd recently thrilled audiences in Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry, so fast vehicles and dangerous stunts were nothing new to him. One sequence that still makes me wince is where those naughty Satanists secretly placed 2 rattlesnakes inside the RV, leaving Fonda lying only inches away from one of them. Yeah, I guess the snake had been defanged and its mouth secured, but I don't think I'd have been volunteering for that particular day's filming, dear viewer. Warren Oates, meanwhile, was one of American cinema's greatest character actors and a favourite of Sam Peckinpah, whether appearing in westerns, crime films or offbeat dramas. Alongside him is Loretta Swit, forever immortalised as Major Margaret Hot Lips Houlihan in the series MASH, while horror fans stateside will instantly recognise Lara Parker as the deliciously wicked Angelique from the series Dark Shadows. Together they make an immensely likeable quartet, which only heightens the tension once events spiral hopelessly out of control. These are genuinely likeable people, which makes their denouement even more horrific. Another enormous asset is Leonard Rosenman's superb musical score. Like much of his work during the 1970s, it never overwhelms the action. Originally titled Circle of Fire, Race with the Devil is the far stronger title, I feel. It perfectly captures both halves of the picture. It's an action movie with the throttle wide open, but it's also an occult horror film fueled by psychosis and mounting anxiety. This was a genuine drive-in favourite during the summer of '75, and it's also right up my alley. I can still remember watching it with my mum many years ago and being absolutely scared shitless, especially by that unforgettable ending. It feels claustrophobic despite the vast open landscapes, relentlessly trapping its heroes no matter which direction they turn. Race with the Devil manages to capture that so well. Would I like to see it remade? Possibly, but only if modern Hollywood could resist the temptation to virtue signal at us for 2 hours, leave the sermonising at the front door, and simply tell us, the audience, a cracking story. For me, dear viewer, Race with the Devil remains one of the finest occult thrillers of the 1970s. Fast, tense, packed with terrific stunt work and overflowing with that delicious sense of mounting unease that keeps building all the way to its brutal climax. Race with the Devil earns 5 witches' brews out of 5 from me. Do you know what, dear viewer? This is an absolute must-see.
Good evening, you're watching BBC2. In just a few minutes we begin the first of our horror double bills here on 2. Our opening feature at 9:15 is Isle of the Dead, starring Boris Karloff. Set during the Balkan War of 1912, the film follows a group of travellers stranded on a remote Greek island when an outbreak of plague places them under strict quarantine. As fear and suspicion begin to take hold, local superstition points to the presence of a Vorvalaka, a malevolent vampiric spirit said to prey upon the living and possess the dead. At around 10:30 we present the British television premiere of The Telephone Box, an acclaimed Spanish short film directed by Antonio Mercero. What begins as an ordinary morning takes a bizarre turn when a man enters a newly installed telephone box and finds himself unable to escape. As curious onlookers gather and events become increasingly surreal, the film spirals into a disturbing and unforgettable nightmare. Then, following the news, weather and cricket highlights from Lord's, our late-night feature at 11:40 is George Romero's The Crazies, where a secret military virus contaminates the water supply of a small American town. The population begins to succumb to madness and violence. As the authorities impose martial law and attempt to contain the outbreak, order rapidly collapses. Combining horror, satire, and social commentary, Romero's film remains as provocative as it is gripping. So stay with us on BBC2 for a night of plague, paranoia, and panic. But first, Boris Karloff stars in Isle of the Dead.
Amid the chaos of the 1912 Balkan War, the stoic General Farides and American war correspondent Oliver Davis find themselves stranded on a remote Greek island when an outbreak of septicemic plague forces the authorities to impose a strict quarantine. Isolated with a small group of increasingly fearful strangers, Farides falls under the sinister influence of the enigmatic Madame Kyra, whose superstitious convictions begin to gnaw away at his once unshakable rationality. Before long, suspicion turns towards the beautiful and mysterious Thea, whom Farides becomes convinced is a Vorvalaka, a legendary vampiric creature believed to be spreading death across the island. But is Thea truly the source of the dread, or is fear, grief, and isolation slowly driving Farides into his madness?
Wait. Tell me, about the wine. Why did you refuse to serve me?
Why do you kill your own countrymen?
And when have I done that?
In my district, they still speak of how you collected taxes in the little villages with field artillery.
They were in rebellion against the taxes.
But they were Greeks.
Who is against the law of Greece is not a Greek.
Laws can be wrong and laws can be cruel. And the people who live only by the law are both wrong and cruel.
Like so many of Val Lewton's finest productions, dear viewer, Isle of the Dead draws its inspiration from well beyond the world of cinematic art. The film takes both its title and much of its melancholy dread from Arnold Böcklin's haunting 1880 masterpiece, The Isle of the Dead, one of the most reproduced paintings of the 19th century. Depicting a lonely island of towering cypress trees, a small rowing boat carrying a coffin, and a solitary white-clad figure. The painting became an enduring symbol of mortality, fitting for the Victorian period and their obsession with the memento mori. It appears during the film's opening titles, while composer Lee Harline's somber score carries echoes of Sergei Rachmaninoff's celebrated tone poem Isle of the Dead, itself inspired by Böcklin's remarkable work. This wasn't Lewton's first visit to Böcklin's mysterious island either, dear viewer. Sharp-eyed viewers may like to recall the same painting hanging on the bedroom wall of Mrs. Holland in I Walked with a Zombie. The parallels between the two films are quite difficult to ignore. Once again, we're transported to an isolated island cut off from the outside world, an island in quarantine. Remember those times, dear viewer? While another enigmatic young woman wanders through the darkness in flowing white chiffon in a state of catalepsy. Director Mark Robson found further inspiration in Goya's devastating series of etchings of the disasters of war. Their influence is immediately apparent in the film's extraordinary opening as General Farides and journalist Oliver Davis makes their way across a battlefield littered with the dead. It remains one of the film's most unforgettable sequences, establishing an atmosphere of atrophy and human suffering long before any notion of the supernatural enters this story. Ever the meticulous researcher, Val Lewton once again reached into world folklore rather than relying upon familiar Gothic trappings. Instead of Dracula, or the traditional vampire myth, he introduced audiences here to the Greek Vorvalaka, In folklore, this was no elegant aristo with a taste for blood, but a far more primitive creature associated with death, corruption, and in some legends, the consumption of human flesh and their liver. Lewton wisely leaves these more gruesome details behind, using the legend instead as a vehicle to explore trepidation, insanity, and the pernicious power of blind superstition. The screenplay, written by Ardell Ray and Joseph Michel, also carries unmistakable whiff of Edgar Allan Poe. The frenzied fear of premature burial recalls the fall of the House of Usher, while the isolated island becomes every bit as oppressive as one of Poe's decaying mansions. Standing sentinel over this prison is the imposing statue of Cerberus, the three-headed hound of Hades, guarding the gateway between the living and the dead, and ensuring that no soul escapes his fate. Production, however, proved far less straightforward than the finished film suggests, dear viewer. Filming began in July of 1944 before being unexpectedly halted when Boris Karloff required back surgery. Rather than wait for his leading man to recover, Lewton simply moved on to another project, reuniting with Karloff to make the film The Body Snatcher. More of that later. By the time Isle of the Dead resumed production later that year, The Body Snatcher had already been completed and ultimately reached cinemas first, despite beginning production months later. For me, the film's greatest strength lies in Isle of the Dead's extraordinary atmosphere. Mark Robson, who's behind the lens here, fills almost every frame with rich visual compositions that owe as much to classical painting as they do to traditional horror cinema. The opening battlefield, the plague-ridden island, and the gloomy crypt are mini-triumphs. Character development occasionally plays second fiddle to mood, and General Faridi's transformation from disciplined military commander into a man consumed by folklore arrives a little more abruptly than I'd have liked. Yet Boris Karloff's dominating performance goes a long way towards making that psychological collapse remotely believable, his quiet governance slowly giving way to distrust, zealotry, and ultimately overwhelming dissolution. The middle section occasionally loses momentum, though, beneath lengthy waffle and philosophical debate, but patience is richly rewarded. Come towards the end, Lewton delivers several of his now famous Lewton bus moments in the final act, a chilling crypt sequence that remains quite unsettling, and 2 jump scares for the benefit of an audience that may be slightly weary by now at this point. While Isle of the Dead may never quite scale the remarkable heights of Cat People and The Leopard Man or I Walked with a Zombie, it remains another fascinating and, of course, deeply cerebral entry in Lewton's extraordinary horror cycle. But we wouldn't expect anything less. It's not a bad film, but runs the danger of not being particularly memorable. So, for this reason, I'm giving Isle of the Dead 3 shrouded cadavers out of 5.
Is that you, Kira?
As we explored in our 1978 retrospective, this horror double bill for tonight concluded with another outing for George A. Romero's The Crazies. If you'd like to hear my thoughts on that film, please look and look again at that episode dedicated to a contagion-caressed review of this movie.
Good evening and welcome to BBC2. Shortly we begin tonight's horror double bill with a classic chiller from producer Val Lewton. Bedlam stars Boris Karloff. Karloff plays the ruthless Master Sims, the powerful overseer of the institution. Then at midnight, our late-night feature is Bug. Where an earthquake in a small American town brings a previously unknown species of insect emerging from deep beneath the earth. But first we go behind the walls of Bedlam.
London, 1761. Aspiring actress Nell Bowen enjoys the patronage of the wealthy Lord Mortimer until she discovers his casual delight in the barbaric treatment of the inmates confined within St. Mary of Bethlehem Hospital. Horrified, Nell publicly condemns both Mortimer and the institution's calculating master, the silver-tongued yet sadistic Sims. Humiliated and determined to silence his outspoken critic, Sims turns the tables with menacing proficiency. By manipulating those in authority, he casts doubt upon Nell's own sanity and has her committed to the very madhouse she dared to expose.
But I made no petition to enter Bedlam.
Perhaps you did it as a jest, Mistress Bird.
You're not going to put me in Bedlam. Not for a little joke. Not for playing a trick. My lords, gentlemen, please listen. I am of sound mind. I know what I do. I know what I say. I did not ask for admission to Bedlam. Please. Please.
Bedlam marked the final horror picture to emerge from Val Lewton's remarkable production unit at RKO, although, as we see, dear viewer, our BBC Horror Double Bill has paid little attention to chronology. The production began life under the altogether more lurid working title Chamber of Horrors before finally settling on Bedlam. Like Isle of the Dead, Lewton once again looked beyond conventional horror for the inspiration, this time drawing heavily from William Hogarth's celebrated series of engravings, A Rake's Progress. The influence is impossible to miss, with several scenes meticulously composed to resemble Hogarth's artwork, giving the entire film an authenticity and visual richness that belies its modest origins. Awarded a comparatively generous budget of around $350,000, especially when compared with Cat People's comparatively frugal $134,000, the extra money is evident in the lavish period costumes and impressive production design. Of course, Hollywood thrift never entirely disappears. The filthy wards of St. Mary of Bethlehem Hospital were ingeniously fashioned from interiors already standing on the RKO lot, including sets previously used for the Bells of St. Mary's, starring crooner Bing Crosby. Directing duties once again fell to Mark Robson, while Lewton himself quietly slipped into the role of screenwriter under the pseudonym Carlos Keith. By this stage, the partnership had become an exceptionally well-oiled machine. What strikes me most about Bedlam is what an unusual beast it is. On paper, it's horror, but in truth, it's a wonderfully awkward hybrid. Part restoration comedy, part biting social satire, part historical drama, and finally, the psychological horror. Somehow this unlikely melange works beautifully. The opening scenes almost lull us into believing we're watching an elegant costume drama full of powdered wigs, aristocratic pomposity, and wonderfully exaggerated manners.
Well, Pompey, are you a pretty boy this morning?
What are you trying to do, Pompey?
Lord, I want to look like the visitor in the hallway.
Sims!
Before the film pulls back the curtain and reveals the grim reality waiting inside Bedlam itself. The supporting cast are an absolute delight. Actor and comedian Billy House is tremendous as the gloriously inept Lord Mortimer, swaggering through proceedings as though he'd wandered straight out of one of Hogarth's engravings. Luton regular Elizabeth Russell appears as a thoroughly gin-soaked Cockney slapper, while Richard Fraser brings genuine warmth and decency as the Quaker stonemason Hannay, whose gentle these and thous lend the dialogue an unmistakable 18th century flavour. Then we come to our two principal players. Boris Karloff gives us yet another radiant performance as Master Sims, the Asylum's director and an utterly eloquent bastard. Sims is educated, cultured and capable of quoting Shakespeare and Thomas Dekker with effortless fluency, loftily dismissing one playwright as second-rate before happily staging his own grotesque theatre of cruelty for the amusement of fashionable society. Opposite him, actress Anna Lee is outstanding as Nell Bowen. Her journey from haughty social climber to compassionate humanist feels entirely believable and gives the film a certain emotional grit. One scene in particular has always stayed with me, and I thought it was brilliant. It's Nell's encounter with Tom the Tiger, and it could easily have descended into banality, yet it becomes one of the film's most touching moments. Faced with a man everyone else regards as a violent lunatic, she calms him through nothing more than kindness and the quiet aspect of humanity. Later, during the rooftop climax, Tom holds Nell's life in his hands. She hangs suspended over certain death, yet he hesitates. Not because he's suddenly become psychotic, but because after years incarcerated, he's utterly mesmerised by the stars above him. It's a cutely lamentable little moment. Beautiful. One can only wonder what torments the poor bugger endured before we ever met him. If there's one sequence in the movie that perfectly sums up Bedlam, it's the garden party scene. The mask of madness. Here the wealthy elite treat the asylum inmates as little more than grotesque entertainment. The mentally ill become living curiosities, wheeled out for laughter, ridicule, and drunken amusement. Watching it today, I couldn't help wondering whether human nature has really changed all that much. Different century, perhaps, dear viewer, different clothes, certainly, but the gulf between those who have power and those who don't remains depressingly familiar. The establishment finds amusement, while those beneath them suffer the consequences. That's my reading of it anyway, and what most of us are living through now. The gilded youth's suffocation is a genuinely disturbing moment. 19 years before Goldfinger turned body paint into popular cinema, Bedlam was already demonstrating just how lethal it could be. The victim dies slowly, suffocating, before an audience more interested in preserving the evening's entertainment than saving a life. Karloff's delivery is chilling, calmly changing the description from dying to dead without the slightest alteration in expression or tone.
Another word, good, gentle reason.
This prince of men. This paragon. Lord Mortimer.
Duck him in the river. A bit of canvas, a handful of coarse sand would get the gilt off.
Master Sims, isn't that harsh treatment for a sick lad?
They have to get the gilt off if he's to be well again.
So you know that.
Know what, Mistress Bowen?
You know that anyone painted over as thick as that poor lad will die.
If I understand you properly, this boy is dying. This boy is dead because his pores are clogged by the gilt. Well then, sweet Mistress Bowen, since you are such a stickler for the correct definition, you will grant me the legal fact that this boy died by his own exhalations. You might say he poisoned himself.
There's something almost Marquis de Sade about the entire sequence, reducing another human being to little more than an object of indulgence before casually discarding him. Thus is the bourgeoisie. Lewton never forgets he's making a horror film either. Hannay's walk through Bedlam's corridors remains perfectly unsettling, with grasping hands suddenly thrust through iron bars and desperate faces materializing from the darkness. It's a classic Lewton bus. Even within the asylum, there's a social order. Bedlam becomes a microcosm of the outside world, complete with its own hierarchy, loyalties, and justice. It's ultimately the inmates themselves who provide the film's ironic conclusion by placing Sims on trial in their own kangaroo court. Literary references abound throughout. Shakespeare, as we said, Thomas Dekker, and even good old Edgar Allan Poe twine their way into the narrative. Sim's downfall recalls Poe's The System of Dr. Tar and Professor Feather, while the finale carries more than a passing resemblance to The Black Cat. These touches never overwhelm the story, but compensate anyone paying close enough attention. It's rather ironic, dear viewer, the British audiences largely missed the film upon its original release. Rather than submit Bedlam to the British censors, RKO simply withheld it altogether, no doubt suspecting its bleak depiction of mental illness and institutional abuse would either be heavily cut or resulting in an outright ban. It wasn't until 1998 that British audiences finally received an official home release with a certificate. Ironically, just 2 years later, The Snake Pit arrived, tackling many of the same issues from a contemporary perspective, a film I heartily recommend to you. I remember my nan liked that film a lot, and we would often chat about it, and it's no wonder Olivia de Havilland was Oscar nominated. The Snake Pit earned praise for its social conscience, while Bedlam, perhaps because it wore the label of horror, remained locked away. Likewise, Samuel Fuller's superb Shock Corridor later found itself falling foul of British censorship for similar reasons. As for Bedlam itself, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Mark Robson's direction is self-assured. Lewton's screenplay is sharp as a tack and astute. The Hogarth influence gives the picture such a unique visual identity, and it's bloody clever. And the performances from Anna Lee and Boris Karloff are first-rate. It entertains, it provokes, and has rather more to say than many productions with twice the budget. There are plenty of blockbuster films today, dear viewer, that could learn a thing or two from it. So, dear viewer, Bedlam. It earns a very respectable 4.5 Masks of Madness out of 5. Beneath the Californian desert, a violent earthquake unleashes a terrifying new species of subterranean cockroach, capable of generating intense heat and fire. As the deadly creatures spread to the surface, respected entomologist Professor James Parmenter becomes determined to understand their extraordinary biology before they bring devastation to mankind. To unlock the creature's secrets, Professor Parmenter pushes his research into increasingly dangerous territory, assisted by his wife Carrie and his colleague Professor Mark Ross. But has Professor Parmenter already set in motion a mandibled chain of creepy crawly events that no one will be able to control? At first glance, Bug might appear to be just another entry in the great nature attack cycle that swept through cinema during the 1970s. Following the enormous success of Jaws, audiences found themselves besieged by everything from spiders and bees to ants and piranhas. Yet Bug proves to be rather a different kettle of roaches altogether. Adapted from Thomas Page's 1973 novel The Hephaestus Plague, the film was produced by legendary horror showman William Castle, a man whose name had become synonymous with theatrical gimmicks and audience participation throughout the 1950s and 60s. Although Castle handed directing duties to Jeannot Schwark, he remained involved behind the scenes, making Bug the final production of a remarkable career before his death just 2 years later. Castle even considered reviving some of his old promotional tricks. Plans were reportedly discussed to rig selected cinema seats so audiences would feel insects crawling beneath them during screenings. Whether many cinemas actually embrace the idea is another matter, and judging by the flea pits of the 1970s, audiences could experience the real thing. But it captures Castle's lifelong belief that horror should be an immersive experience as much as spectatorship. Principal photography took place during the summer of 1974, with exterior filming centered around the University of California, Riverside. The location proved particularly useful as the university's entomological department supplied many of the live cockroaches used throughout this production. Madagascar hissing cockroaches and giant South American cave cockroaches were creeping alongside mechanical insects and detailed macro photography. Working with hundreds of very real insects inevitably brought its own problems. Actress Joanna Miles reportedly had a severe fear of cockroaches, making several scenes involving the live insects especially difficult to film. In an attempt to reassure her, William Castle demonstrated how harmless the creatures were by letting one crawl across his arm. Unfortunately for Castle, the cockroach promptly bit him, rather undermining his argument. Visually, Bug begins as a fairly conventional eco-horror thriller, with mysterious subterranean insects capable of generating intense heat by rubbing their legs together. It's an entertaining enough premise, complete with exploding vehicles and one of the film's most memorable moments, in which a cockroach hiding inside a telephone handset delivers an unforgettable surprise to the unfortunate person answering the call. but somewhere around the halfway mark, the film undergoes a dramatic transformation. Rather than continuing as a straightforward battle between humanity and nature, it evolves into something much more atypical. Professor Parmiter's growing obsession with the creatures slowly eclipses the insects themselves, turning the story into one of scientific obsession, psychological collapse, and perhaps complete lunacy. You see, dear viewer, that's what makes Bug such an intriguing companion piece to Bedlam. Both films chart the gradual disintegration of a central character's grip on reality. Whether you interpret Parmiter's descent as simple insanity, scientific hubris, or even a symbolic unleashing of hell itself, is left largely to the audience. But it's this unexpected shift that gives Bug a personality far stranger than its drive-in title might suggest. What really elevates Bug and needs a mention is Bradford Dillman's extraordinary performance as Professor Parmiter. As the story unfolds, his obsession gradually transcends scientific curiosity. Parmiter begins to view himself almost as an architect of a new order, pursuing an apotheosis through the creation of an altogether different species. Some critics have dismissed this transformation as wildly overblown and pure scenery chewing, but I couldn't disagree more. Dillman commits completely to the role, charting a compelling collapse of the psyche as grief, obsession, and scientific arrogance fuse into something deeply unsettling. The horrific death of his wife only accelerates an already fragile state of mind until reason is finally ingested by delusion. For me, the film reaches its most chilling moment when the insects finally establish a means of communicating with Parmiter. It's an extraordinary scene because by this point he no longer regards them as specimens and as something approaching equals. Dillman stills a moment with such conviction, and for a brief spell, the film ceases to be about killer cockroaches altogether. Instead, it becomes a study of a man who has surrendered his humanity in pursuit of creating what he believes to be the next stage of evolution. This certain scene made the hairs on my neck bristle.
I've gone too far. It kisses. It must be destroyed. It's cracked. Gotta have it fixed. Gotta have it fixed.
Bug doesn't always succeed. The philosophical ideas never quite develop as fully as the screenplay seems to promise, but has a bloody good go. Yet perhaps that's precisely why Bug has endured as a cult curiosity. Like many of William Castle's productions, Bug may lack a bit of finesse, but it possesses an undeniable conviction. 50 years later, it remains for me a fitting epitaph for horror cinema's Barnum. I really didn't know what to expect from Bug. I'd never seen it before, only that wonderfully lurid promotional artwork. But you know what, dear viewer? I was genuinely surprised. There's a uniqueness to it that I found refreshing. As someone who has always had a soft spot for films that wander off the beaten track and embrace the outre, I really couldn't care less what the detractors have said over the years. I can't resist it, especially that wonderfully bonkers climax. So for Bug, I'm awarding it 4.5 subterranean scorchers out of 5. It would have been a full 5 were it not for a few rather gaping plot holes and Charles Fox's electronic score, which at times resembles the sort of twiddling, abrasive synthesizer music I remember accompanying documentaries about plankton in the 1980s. I remember seeing those on Channel 4, don't you know, just before they showed the Tara King Avengers.
Well, Crab, what about the others, eh?
Greedy guts. There are simply too many to squeeze into one episode. So we're making this a two-parter. 10 down, 6 to go.
Another agonizing wait, then?
Certainly not. The rest is already very nearly finished, and we're in the bag and heading the fiefdom's way.
That's a relief. I was already thinking about going on the dole.
Before we go, a huge thank you to everyone supporting me on Patreon. You're all wonderful people, and of course our little fiefdom. With a bit of luck, you'll even get me to that new microphone that I'm in need of.
Good eggs, aren't they, Crab?
Oh, they most certainly are.
I'll keep the blue nun on ice, shall I?
For sure. Until next time, very shortly on Look, Look and Look Again. It's been an absolute pleasure. Cheerio.